Welcome, Gunrunner.
Hello everybody, Retrolaird here, and I'm back with another new video. I've been doing quite a lot recently, you've probably seen, and this one is a request, and I will tell you a little bit how this came about. In the Atari Jaguar thread on Retro Video Gamer, we got talking about the controller, you know, the well-known Jaguar controller, because one of our members, Tom Lee C, did a video review basically of the standard Jaguar controller, and I mentioned that there was obviously a Pro controller, and it would have been nice if he'd done a video comparing the two and showing the differences between them, and he actually wasn't aware that the Pro controller even existed. So another member said, well, that would be really cool to see a video comparing the two controllers next to each other. Could you do a video, Laird? So yes, I can. So shout out to Cryptic33 who asked me to do this video, and I did promise to get it done as soon as possible for him, so this shouldn't disappoint. So this is the Pro controller, to show you it, and this came out, I think it was in about 95 for the Jaguar, so a couple of years after the Jaguar was released. And really, the first thing I should say is it's the controller that the first one should have been, really. A lot of the criticisms of this controller was that it only had 3 buttons for a start, that a lot of people said it was too big and clunky, but mainly people who had never actually used one, because when you actually use it, it's very comfortable. It's got these moulded hand grips on the back that you can see. The buttons and the joypad are very responsive. I like the kind of rubbery keypad. And again, that's another thing that gets a lot of stick on the Jaguar controller, is the keypad. But I've always thought the keypad was a really, really good addition, because as many people know, the point of the keypad is overlays. Now, some games are, you know, benefited greatly by overlays. I mean, they just go on like this, very, very easy to stick on. And for example, this one's for Doom, which is probably one of the best examples I can give. And by having this on, you can quickly on the fly just select your different weapons and your map and things like that. And on other games that perhaps used keyboards on the PC, like Theme Park or Syndicate, something like that, the keypad is actually pretty much an essential part of the game, and it makes it a lot easier to play on the Jaguar than it would have on any other console. So, and also that obviously feature was taken over to the Pro controller, so you can do it thus. And another good thing that I like is that it's very, very easy to just knock out your own overlays for games that didn't have them. I mean, strangely, there are actually quite a lot of games that didn't come with overlays that really needed to come with overlays. I mean, a great example is, one that I actually just mentioned a moment ago, is Theme Park. Now, I just made a simple one. I just knocked it up in paint and just stuck it to a bit of cardboard. I mean, you could always just laminate it or whatever, but I, you know, play quite a lot of Theme Park on the Jaguar still to this day, and I love the game. And one thing I always find is when I play it, is I always forget what the key buttons are. So I just printed that out, and you know, it's pretty amateurish, and you know, but it does the job for me. And you know, then I can select my rides, shots, paths, everything just straight from the keypad without having to, you know, tap each one till I find the right one, which is what I sort of used to do before I had that. So let's go over the key differences. So first of all, the main difference is the buttons. So whereas on the original controller you had 3 fire buttons plus the joypad plus the keypad, on the Pro controller you now have 6 fire buttons. So you now have A, B, C are now joined by X, Y and Z. They're also joined by 2 triggers, L and R on the top. They've also improved the joypad. You'll notice that it's not quite as trying to think sticky outy, but that's probably not the right word. but it doesn't stick out quite as much, and it's a lot smoother. It doesn't feel as sort of jagged around the edges, and it's slightly concaved into the middle like the old one was. So, and it still has the full sort of 8 ways, so it actually feels a lot nicer than the one on the original pad did. The buttons also feel a lot less spongy on this and feel a lot more kind of rigid, and you really feel the key presses. It's really nice and clicky. I don't know if you can hear that on the video, which the old one kind of wasn't. It was quite soft. The keypad buttons are pretty much the same, although they are actually slightly smaller, which is strange. Now, the great thing is about this pad and the old pad is that all of these buttons, the new ones, were mapped to keypad buttons from the old pad. So therefore, this controller will work with every single game that was already made for the Jaguar before it came along. And lots of games, obviously, you can use these new buttons, because basically L and R are mapped to 4 and 6 on the keypad, and X, Y and Z are mapped to 7, 8 and 9. So for example, if you were playing Doom, you could use those buttons to select weapons rather than using the keypad, which is brilliant to retain that kind of compatibility. There's also plenty of games that take advantage of the new pad that were made later, that were sort of designed with the new pad in mind, and there are some Pro Controller specific games. They're games that do work with the original pad, obviously because of the button mapping, but they're very awkward to play with the original pad, and when you play them with the Pro Controller they come into a world of their own. I'll go on to those in a minute, but I just want to sort of finish off the differences between the two controllers. So another thing is the size. Now, showing you like you know, I've just done, you probably can't see it. So, first of all, I'll put them next to each other. Now, you might be able to see that the old controller is actually slightly taller. Not much, but it's not very noticeable. They're about the same width, there's not really much difference there. But, one quite key difference is, you'll notice when I do this, is that the new controller is actually thinner. The Pro Controller is actually a little bit thinner. It still has the moulded hand grips, but it's actually, yeah, slightly thinner. It doesn't really make much difference, I don't find, in the holding it, but it does feel, strangely, although it's thinner and kind of slightly smaller, it does feel a little bit more weighty than the old controller does. I don't know if it's just because of the new buttons, but it, you know, it does feel a bit more solid and a bit more weighty, which is quite funny when, you know, the old controller was pretty solid itself. But I like the weight and feel of the Pro Controller, and I always found with the old Jaguar controller that it felt very much like holding an Atari Lynx, the second one, yeah, the Lynx 2, because that had the moulded grips, and even the Lynx 1 in a way actually, because that still had the rounded parts. But I always found it felt very much like holding a Lynx, and same can be said of the Pro Controller. It's really comfy to hold, and, you know, dare I say it, this is actually one of my favourite controllers out there. And I take my Jaguar to a lot of shows, and whenever obviously I take this controller. And people always pick it up, and obviously a lot of people didn't know this controller existed, because all they do is remember the old one that everyone goes, oh, that's the most rubbish controller ever made. So, whenever people use this, they always go, wow, that's a really nice controller. And they always, you know, first thing they comment is, oh, it's really nice to hold. It's really nice to hold, you know. And everyone who says it's, you know, it's rubbish has never held one, because I've never heard a person pick this Jaguar controller up and go, oh, that's really uncomfortable to hold, that feels awful. And another complaint that people often say about the Jaguar is you've got to have really big hands, which is just nonsense, because I've got really small hands for a bloke, and you can see, you know, it's absolutely no problem for me. I can reach all the buttons without ever leaving the size of the pad. It's just excellent. So let's have a look at the games that take advantage of the new controller. So they sort of fall into two categories really. There's games that kind of take advantage of small features of the new controller, but are perfectly playable with the old one. So one of the first examples of those would be Atari Karts. Now, Atari Karts is perfectly playable with the old controller. Great little game as well, great little Mario Kart clone. It gets a lot of stick, and I've always really enjoyed it. Especially the fact it has Bentley Bear from Crystal Castles in it, which has always been good in my books because I was a massive fan of Crystal Castles, and he's pretty much the only character I play in this game. Now on Atari carts, the L and R buttons can be used to basically do handbrake turns, which, if you've played Atari carts, when you get into the later levels, there are some amazingly tight turns that are really hard to do without majorly braking on the old controller. On the new controller, obviously, one click of the L and R buttons and you just flip around the corner. It makes the game so much easier to play once you master the handbrake turns. So that's the first one. Another one would be Missile Command 3D, which is officially my favourite Jaguar game. I just think it's an amazing game. So if you have a Jaguar and you don't have Missile Command, why? It's not expensive to pick up, and it's a Jaguar exclusive. It was the game originally made for use with the unreleased VR helmet. I've actually been lucky enough to play it with said VR helmet, and it was an incredible experience. But generally, it's an amazing game, and it also really shows off what the Jaguar is actually capable of in the right hands. Amazing 3D graphics. But going into the Pro Controller support, on Missile Command, anyone who's played the 3D version will know you have to keep switching between your bases that rotate round. Now, on the Pro Controller, L and R can be used to switch between your bases, rather than having to press the buttons on the keypad, which actually makes it a lot easier because you can quickly switch bases on the fly, which I really like. Now, games that you really need a Pro Controller for. I've just picked out a couple of examples of each here. There are a lot more games. If you look online, you can actually find a full list of games that have Pro Controller support, sort of beneficial Pro Controller support, should I say. Now, first is the utterly abysmal Double Dragon 5, which is possibly the worst game on the Jaguar. It's a throw up between this and Supercross 3D. Both are equally awful. But I think this might take it just for the pure fact that it's actually worse than the Mega Drive and SNES versions in many ways. The graphics are slightly better, but it has some atrocious sound. It's missing a couple of characters. It's just generally an absolutely abysmal game. And I still cry when I remember that I paid £55 for this stinking game back in the day. I don't know what to say. But anyway, Pro Controller support, as you can imagine, it's a fighting game. It needs 6 buttons. So you have your punches and your kicks. If you play it on the normal Jaguar controller, you have to use the option button here to switch between your punches and kicks, which is incredibly annoying. If anyone who played the Mega Drive version of Street Fighter 2 will remember, that's what you had to do if you only had a 3-button Mega Drive controller. You had to hit the start button to switch between your punches and kicks, which was awful, basically. So the next game is the Jaguar conversion of Total Carnage. Superb conversion, great. It was unreleased by Midway back in the day, picked up by Songbird, finished off and released back in about 2005, I think. Brilliant conversion though, best home conversion of the game. Balls hard, but still a great game, definitely recommended. Anyone who's played the original coin-op of Total Carnage will remember that it was like Smash TV and Robotron before it, in terms of it had the dual sticks. So one was used for firing your guns and one was used for moving your little guy around. Now on the Jaguar it doesn't have dual sticks obviously, so they had to find a way around for that. On the Mega Drive version, for example, of Smash TV, what they did was you fired constantly, one of your buttons rotated left and one of your buttons rotated the gun right. They used a similar control method for Robotron on the Lynx. On the Lynx it worked quite well, but on sort of the mad games like Total Carnage, where you're also the screen is also scrolling, it makes that control method quite difficult. So what they did on Total Carnage is the buttons would do your firing. So if you're playing it on the old controller, you've got those 3, which I think do diagonal down and left, down, diagonal down and right. Then you have to use keypad buttons for the other directions, which just doesn't work at all. On the Pro Controller, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I played it, they're obviously still your down firing. They're your up firing, so diagonal up, up, and diagonal upright. And your L and R fire left and right. Similar control methods was used on Smash TV on the SNES. And that works, it works brilliantly. It's so much easier to play the game. In fact, the game borders on unplayable with the 3-button controller. So if you have Total Carnage and you don't have a Pro controller, you really should have, because you're not playing the game properly. Simple as that. Now there's also a few Jag CD games as well that have been made to make use of the Pro controller. One of the first of those is Battle Morph. One of my favourite games, full stop. Not just on the Jaguar, but of that generation. I think Battle Morph is an absolutely stunning game. It's so superior to Cybermorph, which for the record I think is actually a very good game. Some people give it stick, but I don't think they remember how revolutionary it was at the time, and you know, they forget all the awards that it won at the time as well. Now Battle Morph is such a superior sequel with lovely texture mapping and great soundtrack, and everything about it is just pure class. So if you don't own Battle Morph and you have a Jag CD, then something's severely wrong, because it's easily one of the reasons to own a Jag CD. Now on Battle Morph, the extra buttons are all used to select your weapons, which otherwise would be done via the keypad. Now it's not a big problem to do it via the keypad, but obviously it's a lot easier to be able to do it just with the buttons. And another Jag CD game that uses the Pro controller, but in this case a must-have for the Pro controller, Primal Rage. Great conversion of the Atari arcade game, although it does have absolutely shocking load times. But apart from that, very, very good. And as you can imagine, similar setup to Double Dragon 5, which I mentioned before, is that you need 6 buttons to play the game, your punches and your kicks. So if you're playing it with the original controller, you have to use the option buttons to switch between your punches and kicks or the keypad, and it just does not work at all. So there we have it. That's the Jaguar Pro controller and the original controller. And I also mentioned in the thread on RVG, which I will link in the comments below, is there's also a third controller for the Jaguar, which seems even less people know about, which was a flight stick, a joystick for, I think it was pretty much designed for playing the game Battlesphere with, but it's very good for any game where you're flying around basically. And it's a proper like big PC kind of flight stick. And the unique thing about it was it had a port on the side of the joystick. Sadly I don't have one, so I can't show you. And then on that port on the side of the joystick, you could plug in your Jaguar controller into the side of it, and therefore you still had the keypad. So you could lay the controller on the desk next to the flight stick and use just the keypad like for the keyboard controls, so to speak, which was a really terrific idea. But the flight sticks are incredibly hard to get hold of now. They were only made in limited quantities, even more limited quantities than Pro controller, so good luck trying to get one. And as I just said, the Pro controller is now getting quite difficult to find. I mean, I remember when I bought mine, I've actually got 2 of them, but I remember when I bought mine, I got my first one for about 25 quid, and I got the second one for about 30-35, so I didn't pay much different. And these are probably now going for over £100 on eBay quite regularly, especially if they're boxed, which is really quite unbelievable. But I hate to say at that price, but they are worth it. I mean, you will find that you'll just get so much a better experience from the Jaguar with a Pro controller. I mean, this really is the controller that Atari should have shipped with the system. And I do think that when they actually brought this out, they should have shipped this with the system instead and just completely discontinued the original controller. And if they had done that, there'd probably be a lot more of them about, sadly. But it's just one of the the many mistakes that Atari made with the Jaguar was using what was originally going to be the controller for the abandoned Panther console. And also they shipped a white sort of creamy version of this for the Falcon as well, with blue buttons, which you might sort of see online. But this is the controller that should have gone with the Jaguar. If you have a Jaguar and you don't have a Pro controller, you really should do. So I hope that's cleared up a lot of the questions that people were asking me on the forum. I did try to answer them, but I think seeing them, especially compared next to each other like that, gives you a much better idea of what it's about. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do have any more requests, anything you would like to see, anything from my collection, or anything you'd like me to explain a bit further, please just drop me a line either on RVG, on Twitter @RetroLad, on Facebook through the RVG group or the various other groups that I run, or you can just shoot me an email through the Homebrew Heroes website. There's plenty of ways to get hold of me, or just leave a comment below, of course. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all soon. Bye bye.